back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and I'm going through all the sets, picking out the best ones for Commander, and these are my picks from Exodus. Finishing off the Tempest block again. Back in the day, they used to have those blocks, and you had Tempest, which was the main one, and then the two expansions, which were Stronghold and Exodus. Very nostalgic for me because this is the set that I started with, and Exodus in particular is very nostalgic for me. And for those who don't know, this was the first set that did the colored set symbols, right, for rarity. That didn't exist before. Every other set, you just had a black and white symbol, and you had no idea, actually, and I had no idea when I first started cracking open packs, that there was even such a thing as rare or uncommon or common. This was the first set that they had that in. They had the gold and the silver and the black, right? So you actually knew when you cracked open a pack, and there wasn't really any internet back then either, by the way, for those who don't know, so you didn't get the spoilers online either. You really had no idea what was going on. You sort of had to figure it out yourself, and this set was incredibly significant because you actually got to see when you cracked open a pack what was a rare, what was an uncommon, and so forth. Really, really significant set and a really fantastic set. There's so many great cards from this one. Again, I was struggling a little bit to figure out which was going to be the top 10. There are cards like Forbid, Seismic Assault, really fantastic cards that I definitely could mention. I can give them an honorable mention here. Seismic Assault, of course, one of my personal favorites. It's very specific, though. You're in a discard land theme. Forbid, again, I don't know. A lot of people might consider this to be in the top 10 from the set. I think it's kind of specific. It's a buyback counterspell. That's really, really important, right? Also, really, really annoying, as people will probably point out. There's just so many. But this is the top 10 that I put together, and I'm starting out number 10 with Culling the Weak, because I think this is really one of the best ritual effects out there. 1 black mana instant. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature, add 4 black. Now, if you compare this to Dark Ritual, which people will say is one of the best rituals ever, okay, you don't have to sacrifice the creature, you only get 3 mana. However, if I'm in a deck where I want to sacrifice creatures, now I get to sacrifice my creature, and then I also get more mana than I would from a Dark Ritual. So again, this is a little specific. It is just a great ritual effect in any deck because you're probably always going to have a creature around that you can sacrifice. But in a sacrifice theme, it's particularly good because obviously you want to sacrifice creatures, and getting 4 mana is pretty darn good as a ritual effect. Coming in at number 9, Price of Progress, 1 in a red instant. Price of Progress deals damage to each player equal to twice the number of non-basic lands that player controls. I just really love this card. I know a lot of people that will shoehorn this into every mono red deck they play because, of course, it's probably not going to hurt you hardly at all, and it can really punish your opponents. I mean, it's instant speed, which is a sort of an added bonus. There isn't a whole lot of reason why you need to cast this as an instant speed, but it just allows you to do it on your opponent's turn if you want to. And I like it because, again, I play a lot of decks with less colors. I don't play those 4 and 5 color decks, and of course, those decks are going to be more likely to play the non-basic lands. In fact, they might even have only non-basic lands. And if your opponent has 10 non-basic lands in play, this is 20 damage to the face for only 2. Wow, that is a pretty fantastic rate, obviously. And I don't know, I just think the added bonus, and I know a lot of people will agree with me, of punishing the people who want to play all those powerful non-basic lands kind of feels nice as well. Moving on to number 8, Spellbook. 0 mana artifact. You have no maximum hand size. That's it. This is a Commander staple for a long, long time because people don't want to have to discard the hand size. There's lots of reasons why you may not want to have a maximum hand size. This has fallen off in popularity a lot, though, since they printed Thought Vessel. Obviously, Thought Vessel giving you that same effect. Spellbook is not doing anything else, right? Thought Vessel is a mana rock, so it's giving you the mana. It's not going to be a complete waste. Sometimes Spellbook can just sit there and do absolutely nothing if you don't have more than 7 cards in hand. Can be particularly good if you're in an artifact theme where you're going to be casting or sacrificing artifacts, stuff like that. Or maybe you just want to cast a lot of spells like in a storm theme, maybe that Thrasta deck where you want to be casting stuff for free so that your commander can be cheaper. Also great there. So not only the you have no maximum hand size thing, but also the fact that it is a 0 mana spell also makes so that it fits into a lot of themes as well. Coming in at number 7, Equilibrium. 1 blue enchantment. Whenever you cast a creature spell, you may pay 1. If you do, return target creature to its owner's hand. hand. This really is an underrated card in the format, I think. This is really, really fantastic. Just being able to pay 1 to bounce your opponent's creatures every time you cast a creature spell, what fantastic value that is. It can really slow your opponents down. You can also be bouncing like token creatures, which of course will not come back, right? If you bounce a token creature, it just ceases to exist. Your opponent won't get it back again. If you bounce a creature with counters on it, of course the counters are gone and won't come back. This card is really versatile. I like it a lot for that reason. Of course, you can also use it on yourself. I can cast my commander, pay 1, get that Spell Seeker back to my hand so that I can reuse its ETB again. So the fact that I can use this on myself as well makes it even better in my opinion. Really underrated card in the format, I think. Coming in at number 6, second versed, same as the first, Erratic Portal, 4 mana artifact. Pay 1 and tap, return target creature to owner's hand unless its controller pays 1. So pretty much everything I just said about Equilibrium also applies here as well. If you're using this on your opponents, of course, they can just pay the 1, but it just sits there and it almost turns into like a Staxy effect where your opponents know you have it, so they always have to make sure they have 1 mana open. Or on the end step, you can just pay 1, bounce their commander back to their hand or something and really slow them down a lot. So it almost turns into a little bit of a tax piece in a way. But of course, where this really comes into play and why I've put it in a ton of decks is because you can bounce your own creatures to your hand. And in particular, there's a lot of commanders out there that you want to be bouncing to your hand so that you can reuse them again, whether they have a cast trigger or an ETB. Lots of commanders out there that you want in your hand. So you will more likely be using this one on yourself, I think, whereas the Equilibrium, I think you'll probably use on your opponents more. But again, the added bonus is if my opponent happens to tap out, now I can just pay 1 and bounce their commander back to their hand and slow them down a whole ton. So I love the versatility of this guy. And again, it's a colorless card. That's why I put it ahead of Equilibrium, so it can go in any deck. That's always an added bonus with any commander card. Coming in at number 5, Mind Over Matter. And I wasn't exactly sure where to put this one. It is an incredibly powerful card throughout the history of the game, but it is kind of specific as well. So 2 blue, 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 blue. That's 4 blue. That's a whole lot of blue. It's tough to play this outside of a mono blue deck, maybe a 2-color deck. I like that. I wish they would do this more. They don't do this nearly enough, where they put so many mana symbols on a card so that it limits the amount of decks you can play it in. I like that. It's an enchantment and has an incredibly powerful ability where you can just discard a card to tap or untap target artifact, creature, or land. And of course, using this on yourself or your opponents, again, we have a little bit of a theme here. They used to do this a lot more again. These open-ended symmetrical abilities. I can use it on my opponent or I can use it on myself. Tap or untap. Man, there's so many different ways to use this. This is a card you can put in any deck, and there's never going to be a situation where you might not want to do one of these things. Of course, this card is infamous for being in the Tolarian Academy deck. Tolarian Academy's banned in Commander, though, so we can't be doing that here. But this is where you want to be using this, where I have a land that taps for a whole bunch of mana, just discard 1 card, and I can untap it, tap it again to add a whole bunch of mana. That's sort of what that deck did, right? Cast a Windfall effect, so now I can refill my hand and start the process over again. It is a really powerful effect. It fits in a lot of decks. It fits in a discard theme. It fits in a tap or untap theme. There's a lot of different themes it fits in. It's just really, really powerful, and I wasn't sure exactly where to put it. I thought this was a good spot. Even though it is kind of specific and it doesn't go in every deck, the potential of this card put it up the list for me. Coming in at number 4, Hatred. 3 black, black, instant. As an additional cost to cast this spell, pay X life. Target creature gets +X, +0 until end of turn. This is another really powerful effect. It doesn't necessarily fit in every deck, but you almost could, all right? And the reason why you could put this in any deck is because of commander damage, right? We all know it takes 21 commander damage to kill an opponent, and every deck has a commander. It doesn't matter if you're playing a Voltron strategy, right? Any deck, you can just attack your opponent with, and because this is instant speed, if they just go, I won't block. Your commander's only a 2/2. Oh, well, guess what? I'm going to pay 19 life. And now that my commander isn't blocked, my commander's a 21/2, and I'm going to one-shot you with it. Instant kill out of nowhere. No one's going to be expecting that. In fact, if you're not in that Voltron strategy, this is almost better. Because again, it's instant speed and your opponent won't be expecting it, so they'll just not block your very unthreatening commander, and out of nowhere you can just kill them. In particular, works extra good if you have a commander that has lifelink, because of course you'll pay however much life, kill your opponent, and then instantly gain all the life back, so you're not out anything. Really good there. It's fantastic in, say, an Alenda deck. Again, another commander where it might be an auto include because it's got lifelink, but also you have a commander where you care about what its power is. So at instant speed, if someone's going to kill your commander, you can pay a bunch of life, make the power bigger, and then of course you're going to get way more of those vampire tokens. So it also works in decks like that as well. Just one of those cards that could probably go in just about any commander deck because it's always going to be usable. Coming in at number 3 is the Oath Cycle. I'm cheating a little bit here. I didn't want to mention more than one. A lot of them can work in the commander format. I will specifically talk about Oath of Druids here though, because I think this is for sure the best. 1 and a green enchantment. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player chooses target player who controls more creatures than they do and is their opponent. Very interesting wording there. They did that for a reason though. The first player may reveal cards from the top of their library until they reveal a creature card. If the first player does, that player puts that card onto the battlefield and all other cards revealed this way into their graveyard. They had to errata these cards quite a bit because there was a lot of shenanigans that were happening, and of course the rules have changed quite a bit as well. Essentially what this card does and why this Oath Cycle works so great in the commander format, of course, because you have more than one opponent. So on your upkeep, you're going to choose the player who controls more creatures than you, and of course that's not very hard to do. All you have to do is have one opponent who has more creatures than you do. You reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature card and put it directly onto the battlefield. That's an incredibly powerful effect in a commander game. You can just go random chance with this and I just get a creature. You know, if you're in a sacrifice theme, you can sacrifice those creatures before your upkeep to guarantee you have less creatures than your opponent does. Then you're guaranteed to get something off the top. And of course, if you can manipulate the top of your library, it's even better. That way you can guarantee that you're getting something that you want. And of course, there's lots of decks out there that are looking at the top of their library or in some way manipulating the top of their library to make sure you get something great. This works on all your opponents as well. Gotta note that, right? With this entire Oath Cycle, all of your opponents get to use this as well. But of course, with all these symmetrical effects, you're gonna make sure you're taking more advantage of it than your opponents do. Really great card in the commander game. Coming in at number 2, and this is one of those cards that maybe a lot of people might pass over when looking at the greatest cards from Exodus. Soul Warden, 1 white mana human cleric 1/1. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life. This really is just one of the all-time best life gain cards in the history of the game. We all know it. There's been entire decks built around this card, Soul Sister decks, right? And of course, again, in the commander format, because you have multiple players, and this counts all the creatures, you are gaining tons of life off of this. Every time anyone's creatures enter the battlefield, you're gaining life. And as we've all probably seen before, a turn 1 Soul Warden gets out of hand so fast. Man, this gains a ton of life. And because it's one of those cards that doesn't seem very powerful, it's not really a target, it's just going to sit there. Your opponents probably aren't going to waste their removal on it, and it's just going to gain you an absolute ton of life. Fantastic in a commander game. I had to put it as high as number 2 on this list because it really is one of the best life gaining cards in the history of the game. One of my personal favorites as well. However, coming in at number 1 for me had to be Survival of the Fittest. 1 and a green enchantment. Pay 1 green, discard a creature card, search your library for a creature card, reveal that card, and put it into your hand. One of the most powerful cards in the history of the game. I mean, I don't know what else to say about it. It really is phenomenal at what it's doing. You know, this is sort of a bygone era when you look back, and they thought that discarding a creature card was enough of a downside that would offset being able to search your library for any creature card. Of course, searching your library for any creature card in a commander game is phenomenal. It's great in any format, in particular in Commander, because we have a singleton format where you only have one of each creature. So if you're looking for a particular one, being able to repeatedly search for those creature cards is fantastic. But of course, what makes this card particularly busted is you want to discard those creature cards, right? This famously was used very effectively in the World Championship Reoccurring Nightmare Survival of the Fittest deck, where you would discard that creature card and then instantly use your Reoccurring Nightmare to put it directly into play. Reoccurring Nightmare being banned stand in the format, of course, but obviously, as we all know, there's lots of other reanimation effects. There's also lots of other just reasons to put cards in your graveyard, right? One of my favorite, if you're in a Gruul deck, is I go search for my anger, then I discard my anger into my graveyard, which is where I want it, and then go get something else out of my deck, right? So the combination of I get to search my library for a creature card, but then on top of that, I get to discard a creature into my graveyard that I probably want there anyway is just so fantastic. This card is busted. Unfortunately, very expensive as well. That's usually how it works. But this for me had to be number one. Fantastic card, especially if you're in the specific theme of what you're doing here. But that is my list, the top 10 cards from Exodus. Another fantastic set, finishing off the Tempest block. I'm going to move around to another block next time. I'm going to jump around a bit with this series. I will take requests, by the way. I've had a couple people request certain sets to go over. You guys have a particular set that you want me to cover in this series, feel free to comment below which ones you want me to revisit. But that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.